Welcome to Global Signs. From Penn State University, we'll be speaking with Professor John Gastill. He is well known for his research on deliberative democracy and group decision-making. He's the author of several books, this year including Hope for Democracy and the novel Gray Matters. Professor Gastill, a very warm welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
John, you hold joint appointments as Professor of Communication, Arts and Sciences and Professor of Political Science at Penn State. Unlike other academics, you've actually experienced and taken part in a political campaign. Can you share with our viewers how that experience influenced your research?
Yes, I can. I write about democracy, and I'm sometimes very hopeful. The book I wrote this year, Hope for Democracy, tells the story of an election reform in Oregon that really does give us a reason to be optimistic about how we can improve elections, how we can help voters make better decisions. So that academic part of me is so hopeful, so optimistic, that it's good that I have experience actually running campaigns, because that makes me a little more pessimistic, a little more cynical, and a lot more realistic about the capacity of voters. When you're running a campaign, there's no time to be dreaming of a better world. It's time to just get people to vote, get them to the polls, and win the election. So I like to think that I have a nice balance of a hopeful, optimistic academic and a pragmatic, tough as nails campaign manager.
Now, there was a New York Times article which claimed that Donald Trump made the whole world darker. What are your thoughts on Donald Trump's presidency?
I think Donald Trump has presented a problem for American democracy. First, he's not unique. There are populist right-wing leaders all around the world who have attracted tremendous support for an anti-establishment message. It's also an anti-intellectual message, which I think is a more serious concern, because the problems of modern society, from climate change to poverty to healthcare to global pandemics, they require serious knowledge and action that is based on evidence. We need to look carefully at the policies we enact to see if they work. And a populist anti-intellectual is not what a democracy needs to lead it forward. So I think Trump and some other leaders like him who are so skeptical of expertise present a real danger for democracy if it's going to take seriously the most serious problems we face.
I see. Now, John, can you briefly explain to our viewers about the American Electoral College system? Why is this important? Should the system be changed?
I'll start with that last question. I actually do think it's time to remove the Electoral College. It will be very difficult to do. It's very hard to amend the U.S. Constitution. The reason I say that is there's a simple idea of one person, one vote. And when we vote for the president, the intuition is that whichever candidate gets the most votes should be our president. And that's often not the case in the United States because of the Electoral College. The reason it exists is there was an idea that states should be a little bit equalized. So even the smallest state should maybe have a little more voice. And so the Electoral College was built so that each state casts a certain number of votes based on its size. But what that has caused in the end is that a tiny little state like Wyoming actually has more power per person than a big state like California. And so it creates a strange distortion. The idea might have been a good one, and there were other reasons for it 200 years ago. But now I think the institution no longer serves our best interest. And if it undermines the idea of one person, one vote, I think it undermines some of the legitimacy of democracy.
John, can you tell our viewers about the vote counting system in the United States? It's quite confusing for most of us over here.
Well, I think it's confusing when you have 50 different states who counted votes 50 different ways. And a state like Pennsylvania took several days to count its ballots because the Secretary of State, who runs the elections, encouraged voters to fill out mail-in ballots. It's not possible to suddenly have the facilities and personnel to count these ballots quickly, especially when, in the case of Pennsylvania, the legislature would not allow the ballot counting to start before Election Day. In some states, they can start early, so they finished earlier, but that's why it's so different in the United States.
John, the presidential race was so close. Did you expect Joe Biden to win?
Well, yes, I have all my career, I've been involved in polling. As you said before, I used to be a campaign manager, and we would conduct polls that were very important to our campaigns. Then I studied polls as a graduate student and as a professor, and now I conduct polls academically. Polling has become incredibly difficult. As you know from your own experience in life, you often just don't answer the phone if you don't know who's calling. And so when a pollster calls you, you're more likely to hang up or not even receive the call. So because it's so hard to reach people, it becomes harder to estimate what the real population thinks when you only reach a small and somewhat distorted sample of that population. And obviously the polls were wrong. Obviously it was a very close election. The polls really didn't think it would be that close.
With Joe Biden as president, what changes are you expecting?
Only small changes in all likelihood, because in the American system, to govern effectively, you really need to have control of the presidency, the Senate, and the Congress. Biden will have the presidency and the Congress, but we won't know whether he has the Senate until January. That will actually require him winning an election in Georgia for a senator.
How will the administration deal with the coronavirus pandemic going forward as the election is now over?
Well, what we can do is hope that there will be a more serious and consistent federal government response to the coronavirus. I think there were political reasons for the way Trump was handling it. The best way I can put it is what Donald Trump was saying to Americans the last few months was part of what they wanted to hear. They wanted to know that things would be okay, and maybe they wanted to believe it was okay today, right? To not believe the facts that are piling up in front of them and just to believe a happy message. After an election, that happy message is not necessary. There's no election coming right up, so hopefully really whichever party has control of which branch of the government shouldn't matter, and the United States will get more serious in having a consistent federal response to the coronavirus.
Now, finally, John, are there any stocks that you would like to recommend to our viewers today?
Hold. My recommendation is hold, hold, hold. I'm a big fan of mutual funds, so you don't get too caught up in Peloton or Zoom or any individual company. And hold, that I think the volatility in the market is scary, but the point of investing in the market is for the long term. So I can't name a stock, but I am a big endorser of the buy and hold strategy.
Professor John Gastill from Penn State University, thank you for being with us today on Global Signs.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us today on Global Signs. Professor Gastill recommends investing in mutual funds. Until we meet again next week, please be safe and healthy.